Greetings, friends. As we count down the final hours and minutes until we ring in another new year, I thought it might be appropriate for me to take a few minutes and share my thoughts around some things you could do differently this year to make your time in the kitchen more enjoyable, less stressful, and to make your food taste better. Now, calling a thing a resolution is a virtual guarantee that you will fail to stick to it. So with that in mind, these are my 10 rules for better cooking in 2023. Rule number 1, buy and cook with as many whole foods as possible. This isn't a call to patronize a certain grocer in particular, rather that you buy raw, unprocessed, natural, whole foods and process or cook them yourself, adding seasonings and oils as you go. Why? Well, first, it just gives you that much more control over the taste and quality of your food, and in general, you'll consume less sugar, sodium, and fat by working with the natural ingredients themselves as opposed to processed, albeit convenient, alternatives. Now, clearly, even on this channel, you've seen me use some store-bought processed ingredients. That's why the rule here incorporates the words "as possible." If you're a homemaker, retired, or have a joy of cooking that allows you to spend a couple hours or more a day in the kitchen, then you don't really have many excuses to need convenience foods. But that's clearly not the case for all of us. So next time Taco Tuesday rolls around, try slicing and dicing your way to a fresh salsa with tomatoes, onions, lime juice, and cilantro. Or buy some corn tortillas, the shorter the ingredient list the better, and bake up some fresh homemade chips. Or the next time your family is craving spaghetti and meatballs, roll up those sleeves and ball out with homemade meatballs and grab some tinned tomatoes, fresh basil and garlic, and simmer up a sauce of your own making. You'll know exactly what you're putting in your own body, you'll consume less junk, and you'll even produce less waste. That's a win-win-win. Rule number 2, cook with someone that you love or care for at least once a week. More is better. Cooking, at its very core, is about sustenance and nourishment. How can we use ingredients we have to fuel our bodies? This fact has been true for all human history, from our ancestors hunting and gathering to the dinner your mom or dad or spouse prepared last night. We lose sight of this fact given the radical advancements in both convenient and varied food to which we now have access compared to 100 or 1,000 or certainly 10,000 years ago. The fact remains that by cooking for others, you are giving of your own time and energy to share nourishment with them. Even if you're cooking for yourself too, it's a deeply altruistic act, and one which is only made more satisfying, I think literatively and figuratively, by sharing the experience with a loved one. It could be a spouse, a child, a parent, a friend, or a neighbor. The point is that you are engaging in this generous and restorative act in partnership with someone you care for. I'm not trying to go all Eckhart Tolle on you here, but I believe deeply that sharing time in the kitchen, preparing a meal with friends and family, will not only strengthen your relationship, but allow you to create meaningful memories together. And in a world where ever more of our interactions are digital, shared through calls and screens, I can think of few habits that would bring greater fulfillment to your relationships than sharing time and space in the kitchen, bringing together a truly tasty meal in tandem. Rule number 3, keep your kitchen clean, neat, and organized at all times. And I do mean at all times. Everyone knows it is more cozy, satisfying, and sleep-inducing to crawl into a clean, made bed at the end of a long day. The same is true of a clean kitchen. Sink full of dishes, pantry disorganized, fridge cramped up with 3 weeks worth of leftovers and takeout, half of it well past its expiration date. If any of these describe the state of your kitchen at any moment, you are far more likely to reach for the phone to dash yourself some pizza or Chinese.
Yeah, I'd like to place an order for
The
delivery.
first lesson to set you on the road to a perpetually tidy workspace is to clean as you go. Finish with a dish or utensil, wash it, dry it, and put it away. Or rinse it and toss it in the dishwasher. Another important component here is to keep your cupboards and pantry organized. Check dates and freshness regularly. If you cook very often, maybe you'll want to keep a list of pantry staples you always want on hand and make notes when supplies are running low or will be going bad soon so that you don't run out or waste unnecessarily. Lastly, if you're someone who really struggles with this, and believe me, I was definitely in this camp for quite some time, start by setting a rule that you will not go to bed with dishes on the counter or in the sink. If you really stick to this, you'll get pretty sick of cleaning up a pile of dirty, stuck-on dishes when you're ready for bed, and without even noticing, you'll find you begin to clean as you go reflexively out of a fear of having to clean up a dishpocalypse at the end of the day. Rule number 4, bake your own bread. You don't need a fancy stand mixer or a bunch of fancy tools to make really good quality bread. A bowl, a spoon, a spatula, some flour, yeast, and water is really all you'll need. And some patience and an oven. You are definitely going to need an oven. Am I telling you never to stroll through the deli and grab some brioche buns for a burger, or that you should never wander down the bread aisle and grab some white bread for a PB&J? Of course not. But baking your own bread has 3 great benefits. First, store-bought bread is packed with extra sugar and other shelf stabilizers you don't need. Seriously, check the nutritional info next time you grab a loaf of Mega Mart bread. You might be surprised at what you see. Secondly, once you start baking your own bread, you'll learn the discipline of delayed gratification. Again, I'm not your shrink, but I can tell you that almost without exception, every single loaf of bread I've ever baked tasted better than something I bought at the store. Could I actually tell them apart in a blind taste test? I'm not sure, and maybe I wouldn't even pick the homemade one at that. But the delight of that first bite of a still warm from the oven loaf of homemade crusty baguette is very real, and one which you need to experience. Finally, less experienced cooks or those averse to the kitchen in general can have their confidence boosted mightily by baking their first few loaves of bread. They'll learn it's not that complicated, it's deeply rewarding and nourishing, and they'll even, if they keep at it, begin to learn how varying the amount of water or flour or yeast or rise time can affect the final product. It's cool stuff. So if you haven't ever or don't often bake your own bread, here's your wake-up call to try it. Rule number 5. Plan your meals in advance and try to shop for groceries only once a week, maybe twice. I fully understand this rule is easier for some than others, and hectic, unpredictable work schedules and the presence of folks you need to care for, including but not limited to kids, can throw wrenches into meal plans in a heartbeat. But when you can, if you can, try to plan out your meals a week in advance, say on a Saturday or Sunday night. Make a grocery list based on the plan, shop once, and be done. Here's why. If you're a generally indecisive person such as I, this takes the dreaded guesswork out of the what do you want for dinner dilemma. We've all been there, right? You text your spouse or your roommates, what do you want? And they say, I don't care, whatever you want. And you're like, well, what about burgers? And they're like, And you're like, well, then give me something. They're like, I really don't care. And you're like, well, maybe I can do seafood. I don't know. Seriously, let's just put an end to that, like once and for all. Additionally, shopping after work when you're hungry, tired, and are stressed is a great way to break the first rule of this list and end up coming home with a frozen pizza, junk food, or takeout. I get it, it's gonna happen, but when you can, try to avoid it. Furthermore, shopping from a list helps prevent you from making all those impulse buys that people like me that manage grocery stores want you to make. It'll keep you from buying things you don't need or already have, thus saving you money as well. That's why I say only shop once or twice a week. The fewer times you go shopping, the fewer chances you have to make impulsive decisions, resulting in unhealthy food and wasted money. If a whole week seems too daunting to you, start with 3 days of meals, shopping, and go from there. The final reason I love this rule so much is because it helps reduce food waste. We waste an awful amount of edible food each year because we make too much, don't want leftovers, forget we have them, come home with takeout when the pantry was stocked, etc., on and on. By planning meals out, you can prepare meals that synergize ingredients, plan to use leftovers in creative and innovative ways, and just generally cut down on bad food choices, food waste, and save money. That is another win, win, win. Rule number 6, try something new each week. This one is pretty straightforward. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having favorites or go-to meals. But to live your best culinary life, I recommend trying a new ingredient, cooking method, or dish each week, or if you don't cook too often, once per month. Some of my favorite dishes have been ones I researched and tested for this channel and would have never had otherwise. Experimenting with different regional or international ingredients and recipes is a great way to expand your culinary repertoire and discover exciting new flavor profiles you never knew existed. Rule number 7. Get a good knife, get comfortable with it, and keep it sharp. I get a handful of comments or questions from people asking about recommendations for kitchen gear, none more frequently than on the subject of knives. No matter your level of skill in the kitchen or interest in cooking, if you're going to cook, simply put, you need a good, sharp knife that feels comfortable in your hand and that you are at least moderately skilled in using. And no, a good knife doesn't mean it has to be some $300 Japanese steel blade that's forged and custom etched. America's Test Kitchen has consistently rated the Victorinox Fibrox Pro 8-inch chef's knife as their best overall knife for something like a decade plus at this point, and it'll only set you back about $50. Find one that feels good to you, practice with it until you can julienne a pepper and brunoise a carrot with ease, and then keep it sharp. The best way to do that is to take it or send it somewhere and have it done professionally every 6 to 12 months, depending on usage rate. A sharp knife is a much safer knife than a dull one and makes mincing veggies, carving meats, and slicing pies a breeze. Rule number 8. Master at least one dish you can prepare anytime for anyone. This goes out to all of you, the avid cooks and those terrified of turning on a burner who just happen to be watching this along with said avid cook. You should perfect at least one dish that you feel at ease preparing in any setting for any guest. Whether it's your in-laws, heads of state, or Gordon Ramsay himself, you should feel at home preparing and serving it. This will take some practice, of course, and lucky are those who get to consume the fruits of your efforts of perfection. But however long it takes, find that dish you can make with your eyes closed in the kitchenette of a pop-up camper. That way, when the time comes to cook for a guest, and it will come, believe me, you won't be panic-stricken and will be able to enjoy the cooking process and feel confident in what you're serving. Rule number 9. Cook and eat by the 80-20 rule. At some basic level, your body is just an organic machine, and food is nothing but fuel to maximize the machine's function. And to the very small segment out there of you that can apply this discipline and eat nothing but clean, whole, low-fat, nutritionally dense foods, I truly applaud you. Because at a much more holistic level, we are much more than just the machinery of our muscles and fluids. None of us are getting out of here alive, as the saying goes, so perhaps a moderation between the food as fuel view and the food as art, pleasure, and a source of joy view is needed. Living by the 80-20 rule means that roughly 80% of the time you should strive to eat health consciously, while 20% of the time you can indulge in those less nutritionally minded cravings. The rule is general to dissuade the unhealthy tendency for those of us with previously unhealthy relationships with food to obsess over each meal or bite, soaring with the highs of satisfying the binge and then crashing with the shame of giving into temptation once more. The whole idea is to suppress the compulsion to count calories and shame yourself for each supposed dietary failure, leading to a new cycle of denial and binge. Again, I'm not trying to get too psychiatric here. Much like the try something new rule, keep this one simple as it sounds. 80% of the time, eat clean and health consciously, and the other 20%, eat what you desire. Not as a reward for being good, but just as part of a healthy, balanced diet. And finally, rule number 10. Mise en place. This rule could easily be number 1 if these were listed in order of importance. Mise en place is French for basically putting in place. The idea in the culinary world is that you have all of your ingredients prepped and ready to go before you begin cooking. This starts with the simple act of reading the recipe all the way through before you begin, preferably twice. Then, prepare all the ingredients so that you can add them to the dish whenever they are called for. Restaurants turn out extraordinary numbers of plates per hour with a relatively small number of people actively cooking because every ingredient is prepped and ready to go. No one is mincing a clove of garlic to order for each chicken marsala order that hits the line. Now, I realize cooking at home isn't the same as a restaurant, but this particular practice is one you should adopt. Your ease of cooking will increase instantly, and therefore your enjoyment of the process will too. So whether you adopt all 10 of these, 1 or none of these rules, I want to stop and say thanks sincerely for watching this video. Ultimately, if you consider yourself a home cook, you're doing it because you love to, or have to, or perhaps both. Whichever one of those baskets you fall into, I think if you follow these rules, you'll find it less of a chore and get more enjoyment out of the process. Thanks so much for watching, and best wishes to you and yours in 2023.